Season 2 was such a wild ride, and I'm not sure that I loved it, so let's unpack it. Hello and welcome back to the Miscellaneous channel. We do miscellaneous things. I'm Selene. I typically cover TV, pop culture, internet trends, and other miscellaneous things on this channel, so subscribe if that's your vibe. So today I wanted to discuss the second half of Season 2 of Sex Lives of College Girls on HBO Max. I did a part 1 to this video already, discussing episodes 1 through 4 and sort of my first impressions on the characters' journeys. But in this video, I wanted to talk about the season as a whole, some of my issues with it, and just where the characters' journeys went by the end of the season. Since the episodes came out in pairs week by week on HBO, I'll be reviewing episodes 5 through 10 of this season. Sorry, this part 2 discussion is a little delayed. I am feeling a little bit under the weather. I'm still excited to talk about this. It's kind of interesting when a show I really love does a bit of a 180 and becomes a show I have a more love-hate relationship with, and this is that type of show. Let's just get into this season 2 and my issue as a whole with this season. I think I have sort of pinpointed what my issue is, but I'm still kind of working through articulating it. So if you feel the same way, please comment below, or if you have things to add, or if there's a term for something I'm saying but I'm not saying the term, let me know. And the big issue with season 2 that overwhelmingly the fandom has been saying is that it is too fast-paced. Because they've chosen to go more of a sitcom route with 25-minute episodes instead of like a 45 to hour-long dramedy or something like that a lot of other shows do. Pretty much universally among the fandom, everyone says they either need to add more episodes and go back to the old school 20 to 25 episodes, the way The Office was, or nowadays Abbott Elementary is doing a system like that, or if they want to stick to 10 episode seasons, they should make them 45 minutes to an hour. Kind of how the pilot episode was. So we all know that this is the issue. There's just too much happening to these characters in a short amount of time. If characters are developing feelings, taking action on feelings, having sex with a new person, becoming official with that person, and then having problems with that person, then breaking up with them on the span of like 1.5 episodes, that feels pretty rushed, and it's hard to be that invested in that relationship if we didn't get the time to enjoy it. But what I realized about this format is that watching the show feels like I'm watching an outline of the script instead of watching the full breadth of the script and the story happening. It feels like so many scenes on Sex Lives are like leading up to a shocking thing, a shocking moment, and then they cut away right when that moment happens. So someone delivers a big line like, "I want to break up," and then we cut away, and either that's a cut to black as a cliffhanger, or it's a cut to just another storyline going on. When you come back to that story where the shocking thing happened, you don't see the aftermath of the shocking thing. You see the person involved, usually one of the girls, telling other people about it. So instead of seeing like the breakup conversation or seeing how the person responded to the person saying, "I want to break up," we see the person who initiated the breakup tell the other girls like, "I broke up with this person." Like, how many times do we see someone knock on someone's door, say something really important or shocking, and then we cut away and we pick back up when they're describing the event? This was exactly what happened when Kimberly broke up with Jackson. All we saw was his face after Kimberly said, "I want to break up," and then we cut away and we don't hear from him again. He disappears. But I, as an audience member, want to know what is the aftermath of that shocking line delivery. I want to see how it goes down. Like, real life happens in those in-between moments of life. And if you show those on TV, those are like the most relatable moments. If we saw the breakup conversation between Jackson and Kimberly, maybe talking about how they have nothing in common, or how he didn't support her in her endeavors or whatever, that would humanize Jackson, it would humanize Kimberly for us, and it would maybe be a relatable conversation to someone that has gone through a breakup. It's those moments that I'm consistently missing all of the time, especially in season 2 from this show. Like, sometimes that's it for the situation. Like, for Jackson, we don't hear from him again. He's disappeared, he served his purpose, we don't get any closure, and then sometimes if we're lucky, we get the explanation eventually from the character involved about what happened during that aftermath, so at least we learn a little bit. For example, when Leighton got exposed for giving an STD to the other Kappa prospect girl at the big Kappa event, we just see the shocking moment and then we cut away, and then later on we see Leighton explaining what happened after that. We hear that she denied the girl's claims, and that, I mentioned in part 1, was kind of a confusing sequence because I wasn't sure, wait, what happened? Leighton gaslighted her and the Kappas just believed Leighton, I guess. We don't know what the aftermath looked like. And this is kind of a golden rule of screenwriting. When you're writing a script, they always tell you show, don't tell. But it's just advised to, if you can show something with action instead of someone just telling you about it on screen, it is more engaging to the audience. And I just feel like this show kind of breaks that rule a lot, and it's kind of surprising because it's kind of a very standard rule. I assume it's just because they just don't have enough time in their teeny tiny total minutes for the season, and they end up cutting a lot of these extra fluff scenes. But I just feel like in those extra scenes where we see an aftermath of a shocking event, those are the most interesting parts. An even simpler example of this big issue I'm talking about is the sex scenes in season 2 compared to season 1. Being HBO, season 1 had a fair bit of nudity, even though it wasn't like super graphic. There were sex scenes in season 1 and they were prominent. And season 2 had none of that. We had the typical sitcom, two characters start making out and then they cut away. And then you cut back in when they're like laying in bed having some sort of important conversation. I always say on this channel, I'm kind of a prude, so I don't care how much nudity they're showing. But I did notice that it was a stark contrast between season 1 and season 2, how they were cutting out all of the in-between sex scenes that were so prominent in the other season. And also it's very surprising coming from HBO, where I feel like almost for every show it's like a requirement to show a certain amount of nudity. Like whenever I watch these HBO shows, I just picture the HBO executive sending back the edit being like, not enough nudity. But I guess that's not how it goes down, because season 2 had very little amount of nudity, and it's something that kind of adds to that feeling of sitcomification of the whole show. But this example just goes to show that even like the juiciest content, which would be like the graphic sex scenes, was scrapped for time this season, and we just ended up with a collection of major plot points happening one after the other, where it just felt like an outline rather than the full entire story. Like when I watch the recap, it almost feels like the actual episode. And all the ADR issues, I don't know if I've covered this in past videos about this show, but there is a lot of ADR problems, and I assume it comes from having to rush the storyline so much. If you're not familiar, ADR is a practice in filmmaking where they will re-record audio later on and then splice it into the final edit, so that whatever the actor was saying in that moment isn't what you're hearing in the final product, because maybe the line read was wrong, there was a technical issue with the mic or the audio, they thought of a better line. Whether you knew of that term or not, you probably noticed the issues around ADR with this show, because there's a lot of clunky audio added in post, and I have no idea if it's because maybe they're chopping so much of the story in the editing room that they have to add lines to make things make sense, or maybe the writers procrastinate on jokes and decide to figure out better jokes later on and then splice those in. I wouldn't care at all about this if it was done seamlessly, but it is super distracting. There are whole scenes where you hear someone talking and their emotions don't match what they're saying, and you get the reaction shot from the other people for way too long. And it's also a problem on Mindy Kaling's other show, Never Have I Ever, but it's definitely less of an issue, maybe because that show has like longer episodes and more time to work with. But back to my feelings on this whole thing feeling rushed. I think my favorite scenes are where we get to sit with the characters and feel their struggle and have some time with a mundane moment and then see them succeed. And then you get to celebrate the resolution to whatever struggle they were going through. And that's why my favorite episode this season was absolutely episode 6, which was the doppelbanger episode. And specifically, Leela's storyline that episode is exactly what I'm looking for more from this show. We saw her at first reject the idea of being a manager and blow up at Kimberly a bit. And then we see her come back and apologize and come around, and we see her vulnerable side, which for her character that was awesome because she's usually just comedic relief, and comedic relief characters don't get the privilege to be kind of multi-dimensional like this. So it was nice to see layers to Leela. We saw her get vulnerable. Then we saw her practice with Kimberly. I think her practicing with Kimberly was my favorite scene of the whole show, and what I crave the most from it and wish it would just do this more. And then by the end, we do get to celebrate her becoming the manager and succeeding after we were with her on the whole journey. So I think that's a really good example of an arc that feels very ideal for this show to me, and what I wish like all the main characters' arcs would emulate, rather than a cycle of build up, shocking moment, cut, explanation. Also a big issue this season that all of the fans are very confused about, no one has a good answer for it, is the timeline that we saw. We started the season coming back from Thanksgiving break and ended it at the end of the spring semester. And that was wild because that means season 1 happened from start of school to Thanksgiving, which is a pretty short time, and I assumed season 2 would take place from Thanksgiving to the start of winter break, because that would make sense with season 1. Or what they actually should have done is just start season 2 at the comeback of winter break. It just makes no sense that we get this big fanfare for them coming back from Thanksgiving break, which is literally like 3 to 5 days when you're in college. I remember at my college, I would still have classes on Wednesday before Thanksgiving and like assignments due and stuff. So I wasn't like home an entire week for Thanksgiving. In contrast, winter break is like a month long for college students. So it's a big plot hole in the season, like what everyone did for winter break and why there was no fanfare of coming back for winter break if they had fanfare about coming back from Thanksgiving. And I just think they should have just started the season in January coming back from winter break if they were intending to cover the spring semester. I'm assuming they wanted to line up with like our schedule in the real world and have them be celebrating like Thanksgiving and Christmas while we're in the middle of our holiday season. But those holidays weren't that big a deal in the show, so like, what was the point? I don't know. The timeline really made no sense. I guess they just assumed people wouldn't care, but it's just weird and confusing and distracting. So those were my general complaints about season 2. Sorry to be bitching about it, but I like to critique TV shows, and I had high expectations for this one, and I was sadly disappointed. So now I'm going to get into each character's journeys, and I'm actually going to divide it up into like different facets of their life. What was going on the romance front, on the friendship front, and on the professional or academic endeavors front. Starting with Leighton, I think Leighton had the absolute best arc this season, and I think a lot of fans love Leighton coming out of season 2, and I think it's because the writers developed her the most and she showed the most growth out of all the girls, and people love growth. It's funny because I feel like in real life a person like Leighton would be not liked by liberal people, or would be like socially maybe canceled for being such a like elitist, condescending rich person. But it feels like they really put some thought into her journey and growth. I mean, relatively for this show. So on the romance front, Leighton had a lot going on. She came out, which was a big step from season 1, and especially she came out to her family, which seemed to be the hardest part of her coming out journey, and the family took it well. It didn't seem like they would based on what we saw of them from season 1. They seemed pretty conservative, but they ended up being pretty accepting and kind about her coming out as gay to them. She came out to her dad directly, and her mom heard about it through her dad, but still the mom was supportive, even though their relationship seemed to have been tense. It's not really anymore. I assume the writers just didn't want to make like a tragic coming out for Leighton or like a complicated one with her parents, and they want to show like a good example of like accepting parents. So in the later half of the season, Leighton's big romance development is dating a girl named Tatum who looks just like her and is basically a season 1 version of Leighton. She does end up breaking up with Leighton and getting back with Alicia from season 1. And it's interesting how the fandom has really taken to Tatum and loves Tatum. And surprisingly, the fandom kind of turned on Alicia and doesn't like her as much. I'm pretty sure the love for Tatum boils down to one scene and one line where Leighton and her dad run into Tatum and her dad, and their dads are actually old pals, and they end up having dinner together, and Leighton has to pull Tatum aside and be like, hey, I'm not out. My ex wasn't cool with that, but I'm sorry. Can you just have my back? And Tatum says something along the lines of, there's no timeline on coming out. Don't worry, I got you. And I think this line is the big contrast to Alicia last season, who couldn't date Leighton because she wasn't out. Also, a reason people like Tatum, I think, is because we did see their relationship blossom semi-naturally. I mean, by this show's standards, they lasted like 2 or 3 whole episodes. That's like a new record. But we saw them progress from Tatum hating Leighton. We got to see Leighton vulnerable at first, and like kind of she met her match, but then Leighton overcomes that and beats her at her own game and remembers how to be like condescending and elitist, and that's what gets Tatum to pay attention to her. Also, at the art gallery party, Tatum is actually really nice about Leighton after she catches her in her lie of like knowing the person organizing the party. Basically, Leighton was trying to look very cool to Tatum, and Tatum was like, stop, like, I already think you're cool. And that's where they have their first kiss and start dating. So I think a lot of fans enjoyed that journey. I liked seeing it play out too. I think for me, I've just finally accepted that I'm not someone that ships people when I watch TV. Like, I'm not a shipper. I feel brave admitting that. I don't know if it's like the trauma of watching The Office and Friends where couples get together and the show becomes kind of boring, where I never find myself like rooting for people to be together and stay together on TV shows. And I liked Tatum for Leighton, but it did feel like she was there to teach her a lesson about how Leighton has changed from how we met her in season 1. Tatum was that symbol of what Leighton used to be, and by the end of the season, she rejects that completely. And that's what proves to us that Leighton has really grown for reals, and she's no longer the shallow elitist she used to be. But again, I wish we would have seen the breakup at all between Leighton and Tatum, because that's another reason I bet fans that do have strong feelings for ships are upset about. We got no closure, not even a knock and a I want to break up moment from Leighton. We literally just see them have a bit of an argument at the Women's Center fundraiser party, and Tatum leaves, and then later on Leighton just reveals that, oh, I actually broke up with her after that party. And I'm just like, wait, where was that conversation? I want to know how that went down. Maybe Tatum could have been like, I can change, or I'm never gonna change, or we would have seen just Tatum's side of it too. As much as it's obvious Tatum was some sort of lesson, it really takes away from the realism of the situation when you don't show the breakup conversation. And after the Tatum breakup, Leighton gets back together with Alicia from season 1. I did think they had nice banter once we saw Alicia again. I thought we'd never see her again because the actress went to act in Grey's Anatomy. Is she replacing Meredith Grey? Because Meredith Grey's leaving, right? That's wild. Anyway, she came back, and I did think Leighton and her had really fun banter when they saw each other again, but I would have been okay if they had just stayed friends, since they have such good chemistry, and it really felt like Leighton had moved on from that situation. I mean, Leighton and Alicia are gonna have to break up at some point, probably soon, probably 1 episode into season 3 they'll be broken up, so I think they would have been cute just to leave as friends who are like navigating the queer community together or like supporting the women's center or whatever. They just have cute chemistry, but like we know they're gonna have to break up because no relationships last on this show. Honestly, if you do ship couples on TV shows and watch this show, I'm so sorry, because no ship is safe on this show. So on the friendship front, Leighton also had a lot of growth, and that was sweet. She helped Kimberly with her hormone injections, and they got really close through that, and she helped her by taking her to the procedure and being there for her. And I think this was the aftermath of Kimberly being there for her when she came out, being like the first person she came out to. I think Leighton feels like a strong bond with Kimberly from that, and that's why she helped her out so much with the egg donation journey. Also, I loved seeing Leighton bonding more with Willow. I love Willow and I love seeing her in more scenes. Willow becomes kind of an informal mentor to the Essex lesbian community. I don't think they are friends because Willow does end up getting a jacket out of it, which slay. Love that for her. As I mentioned, episode 6 was my favorite, not only because of the Leela journey, but also because we got some of our old pairings, like the OG Sips crew in that episode, plus the new pairing of Leighton and Willow, which is really fun. And by the end, we also see Leighton caring a lot more about the friends she made at the Women's Center, which I wish we would have gotten more hints that she like missed it. It kind of felt like Leighton just forgot about the Women's Center after season 1. But when she came back to it, she kind of had a lot of respect for the members. She had fun banter with them. And ultimately, she donates her $30,000 check from her mom that she was going to give to the Kappas to the Women's Center after learning that they're struggling. So Leighton really pulls through for the Women's Center when they fall on hard times, and she seems to like the people there a lot. It felt kind of sudden because there was like no build up to that, but it was nice to see Leighton's attitude change so much towards them. And on the professional career academic endeavors side of things, Leighton got into Kappas and then quit Kappas within these 6 episodes. Up until the end, she was about to go live in their house the following year, but then when she was at an event, she heard some of the older alumni being not inclusive and realized she just didn't belong there. Or she just wasn't as comfortable being there as she thought, and seems to align in values more with the Women's Center. This also felt pretty sudden, where she turned on the Kappas so quickly. Again, I wish we would have had hints of Kappa being not the most inclusive space, but we saw none of that. We saw Leighton living for Kappas up until the very end. So it felt like just sudden that like the straw that broke the camel's back was the only straw we saw. We also did see Leighton continue her math pursuits, and at first she was resistant to participating in like math extracurriculars. It was the hackathon she got invited to, but then with the encouragement of Kimberly, she ends up going to it and succeeding. We don't get much else about her academic endeavors, but I feel like they'll come back around and be important. She just seems to be like a genius level at math, so I'm sure that'll come into play as the years develop and the seasons come. And we are getting a season 3 that has been confirmed. I forgot to mention that at the top. Overall, a great arc for Leighton, so much growth. I think her biggest mess ups were at the beginning of the season, and it was mostly the STD thing that was like the shittiest thing she did, which was pretty shitty. Not telling a lot of people she had hooked up with that she had an STD or that they should get checked, and I don't think she really resolved that. But I feel like a lot of fans blew past that because they saw a lot of growth by the end of the season. It was like after that she always started to kind of do the right thing, and I think for fans, it's fun to root for a character like that. So moving on to Kimberly, I think all of the rest of the characters, the arcs feel a lot more clumsy and not as thoroughly fleshed out. Kimberly had some good moments and some bad. The egg donation plot was kind of confusing because it was pretty fleshed out at first. It was like, she's gonna go through with this. There was the hormone injections, which I feel like could have been something they just glossed over and didn't show, but they showed the injections. They showed her going to the procedure and her recovering the day after, but then after that we just didn't hear any aftermath of it. Did she get her money? Did she pay the tuition? How many semesters does this cover? Is she gonna have to go in again and give more eggs? Does she have any emotional thoughts about going through this, like about the implications? No, who knows? We don't know. On the romance front, Kimberly dates Jackson's, the hot Kansas neighbor guy that I feel like was just there to have a shirtless hot guy in the trailers to promote the season. But at first she gets med-zoned by him when he takes care of her when she's recovering, but then they end up having sex. It's kind of unclear why he's into her. Like, not why, but like why they start getting each other's attention in the first place, especially because he seems to be having sex with a lot of people, and it feels like suddenly he has sex with Kimberly and then they become official pretty fast. Also, if they were gonna end the Jackson relationship so abruptly, maybe they should have ended it when he didn't support her when she was doing the strike and the boycott of the dining hall and he ignored that and didn't care. I feel like that would have been a good episode to have them break up, because they ended it very abruptly anyway later on, and it was clear they had nothing in common. Like, I feel like past that point their relationship served very little purpose aside from her coworkers calling her shallow for liking hot guys, which it's kind of true. I keep saying I wish she would be with like a nerdy guy. I mean, I guess we'll get to that. Like, speaking of the unionizing episode, Canaan was with her that entire time with the whole rally planning and the strike and the union rep, all that. So maybe that should have been a hint to us that Canaan was going to be an important part of Kimberly's story. So Canaan ends up inviting her to an awards banquet as a date. He does lie and say that he had asked Zoe first, but Zoe was busy and couldn't make it, so Kimberly was his second choice. Kimberly later finds out from Zoe that that was not true, and Canaan never asked Zoe. It's at this econ awards banquet she starts having feelings for him, and afterwards is when she finds out the Zoe thing and starts realizing maybe he has feelings for her too. And poor Zoe, she was just such a plot device this season. They didn't even bother to flesh out that character. Like, we know nothing about this girl aside from some fun facts people have said about her, but like, we got to hear not a peep from this girl except for one line of Canaan did not invite me to that thing, and that's it. Also, she was like mysteriously absent from like the whole middle point of the season. She was just there when Whitney needed someone to make her jealous, and then later when Kimberly needed to find out about Canaan's feelings. Justice for Zoe. Used and abused for plot reasons this whole season. So Kimberly breaks up with Jackson unceremoniously. I already went through that. And after a party, runs after Canaan and they kiss. We do see that Whitney sees this from the distance, and so we know that there is trouble. I do think it was foreshadowed that Canaan might be into Kimberly all the way back in season 1 when he has a half-naked Whitney on top of him and he's kind of focused on Kimberly's side of the room and her bra and her plushie. And I know it kind of just seemed like a whatever comment, but in this type of show where they have so little time, every line matters and means something. And that moment did stick out to me, and I figured at some point they were going to make Canaan and Kimberly a thing. Also, he often calls out like the boys she's dating. Like, he mentions Jackson chose a cheesesteak over you just now, or you only go for hot guys and you're shallow and you have nothing in common. So he points out a lot of flaws with the people she's dating. So I think this is a good situation to segue into the friendship front, which Kimberly seems like she's a great friend up until the end. Does she know? I don't think she knows Whitney's starting to have feelings again for him, but she definitely knows Canaan and Whitney dated and Canaan ended it and Whitney had more complicated feelings. Whitney did not want that relationship to end, and Kimberly does know that. Like, it's weird because Kimberly even asked Whitney if it's okay if she goes as Canaan's date to the banquet as a friend, and Whitney's totally cool with it. It feels like Kimberly is very aware of Whitney's feelings at first, but then when she runs after Canaan to kiss him, she's not thinking of Whitney anymore. And the worst part is the next day when Whitney asks what happened last night, Kimberly lies and just says nothing happened. So that really strains their relationship and leads Whitney, who did want to live with Kimberly, to not want to live with her anymore the following year. I do find it interesting to have a conflict happen between the roommates because we haven't seen them get in any kind of fight, and I think it's important to show that because it's very typical of roommate situations, especially when you're a freshman. I feel like you're still figuring out who you want to live with and what you like to live with or not. So it makes sense for them to have this type of conflict. Earlier in the season, Kimberly's a great friend to people. I mean, she bonds a lot with Leighton with the egg donation thing. We covered that. But she's also a great friend to Leela, encouraging her and being the reason she gets the manager job. Even when Leela pushes back so much against her, Kimberly is still very earnest and genuine and is down to help her out. Even later on when they do the rally, Leela gets mad that Kimberly is taking part in a strike and how that hurts her as a manager. But I think because Kimberly was a good friend to her earlier and helping her get the manager role, Leela does end up showing up to the rally, even though she's in a disguise, to support Kimberly. So I thought that showed that Leela feels some sort of friendship or warmth to Kimberly, that even something she didn't approve of, like the rally, she still showed up to support. Professionally, I feel like the unionizing episode, I think it was episode 7, was Kimberly's big, like, career endeavor moment that we saw, because she works closely with Senator Chase to demand better wages for the food workers of Essex. And I've seen quite a few fan theories that think Kimberly's gonna get some sort of internship through Senator Chase because they work together on this. She seems interested in political activism of some sort, and I definitely see that as a plausible thing. I think that's a good theory. Even if she did get Senator Chase canceled for like 5 minutes, but they resolved it. Aside from this plot, I have no idea what's going on in Kimberly's like academic life. I don't even know what she's interested in, so it does seem like activism is like the thing Kimberly's gonna be doing. So overall, Kimberly's arc was a bit sloppy. She had a lot going on, but there was just a lot of like plot holes or confusing things, or just like it was very rushed, like not seeing the aftermath of Jackson, the Canaan thing, feeling out of character for her, not considering Whitney's feelings. But she also had great moments like bonding with Leighton and bonding with Bela. Kind of good and bad with Kimberly. My prediction for her at some point in the future is maybe like her and Leighton will hook up a little bit. Like not be endgame or anything, but maybe she'll have, you know, a bisexual experience or awakening at some point. I just feel like there was something to that scene where Bela or whoever asked Leighton to rate the roommates and like who she would be with. And I feel like Leighton was kind of implying Kimberly was near the top of the list. Though that scene kind of served to lay the groundwork for Leighton being into someone that looks just like her, because she said she would rank herself first, and right after that she met Tatum, and it kind of played out. So I don't know if I'm reading too much into that scene. I might be, but I do feel like there was something interesting about that interaction. So let's move on to Bela. Oh, Bela. She was in her villain era this season. She was definitely, of the main 4, the most hated character. At least that I saw on the subreddit. There was a lot of discourse around Bela this season. I personally enjoy a flawed character that keeps messing up. Sometimes I feel like these days on social media, fans always expect characters to like always do the moral right thing at all times, and I just feel like that's pretty boring TV. And I love mess, so I don't mind Bela being like an absolute mess this season. And I believe Bela's arc this season was all about showing her deep insecurities that are hidden under this veil of confidence that she puts out into the world. What I don't like about her journey is that it feels like it was poorly written, with like no room for nuance, to the point of her character losing any relatability. So I'll elaborate. On the romance front, Bela starts being uncomfortable with her friends with benefits situation that she has going with Eric, because he starts bringing a girl as his date to like the theta parties, and she sees that and gets jealous. And after they confess their feelings for each other, they become monogamous, which then lasts about 0.2 seconds before she cheats on him with the comedian Dan O'Connell. It's a fictional comedian. I don't know why I said his name like it was mean something in the real world. Her sleeping with a comedian was like one of the most controversial things to ever happen on this show on the subreddit. People were upset, and I think there's a lot of issues here. First of all, Eric was stepping on Bela's toes because Bela was kind of getting it in with this comedian and he was down to read her stuff, but then Eric steps in and he already has like a whole packet prepared while Bela does not. Yes, the patriarchy has helped Eric to have this preparation ready, but more than that, even Eric just has seniority. He is an upperclassman who runs a whole organization that is prestigious, so he has all these credentials that have led him to make a fulfilled comedy packet to give to the comedian. I'm just trying to say, in this kind of environment, seniority roles and Bela as a freshman just does not have the material ready to go to start submitting to comedians. And it makes sense. Eric as an upperclassman is already thinking about what's next and what jobs he's trying to land after college, while Bela still has years of college left to go. So she tries to pull an all-nighter to make this packet, but then decides that's not enough and knocks on his door, their favorite narrative device, knocking on someone's door and saying something, and they start making out and they cut away. Of course, very few people are questioning the older comedian side of things where, he's sleeping with a barely legal woman. But just in general, the situation, it was kind of confusing to me because what is the benefit Bela thinks she's getting from sleeping with him? Like, does she think this will lead to him reading her packet or getting her a job? Like, to me, sleeping with a guy like this seems like a fast track to get him to not take you seriously. And maybe that's like the 28-year-old in me talking, and a 19-year-old wouldn't realize that, but it just felt like a random choice. Like, it's messy and I don't mind seeing messy. I just don't get the logic. And because the show doesn't like showing and explaining people's logic, we're just left to guess. So she intends not to tell Eric, but Eric finds out and breaks up with her. His dads step in and defend him against her. Like, I think they just brought in the dads for funsies. I like one of the actors a lot. He's on one of my favorite shows called The Other Two. I think he's typecast as like a gay dad. And it's interesting, after she sleeps with a comedian, her character seems not desirable by men. I don't know if it was intentional. Like, a guy approaches Priya and ignores her, and it's weird because season 1, it seems like everyone's happy to sleep with Bela. That was kind of interesting. She didn't really have much romance going on after the comedian stuff and the breakup with Eric. So on the friendship front, Bela does not have many tender moments with friends the way the other girls do. And I did find it interesting how at the end, Whitney and Kimberly were trying to room together before, they had conflict. They wanted to room together next year, and they weren't sure if they wanted to extend that invitation to Bela. And I wish we saw more of this with the roommates, because Bela is a lot and she has a lot of boundary issues, and I feel like it's for comedic purposes in the show, but in real life that would get very, very annoying and difficult to live with. I liked seeing a hint of like the other two roommates being like, I don't know if we want to live with Bela actually. And that makes a lot of sense to me, and I wish we saw a little more of that throughout the season, especially because Bela was having this journey to rock bottom this whole season. Bela's other friend group is the Foxy, the comedy magazine or comedy group she founded, and I found it nice how the girls were trying to defend her when Eric was accusing her of sleeping with a comedian, and at first they're like trying to defend her, and then they realize Bella's in the wrong. The only time Bela seemed to show some slight growth was in the Priya episode where she hosted her friend from back home as like a prospective student weekend situation, but it just took so much humiliating of Priya and alienating her and making her feel like a total dork, and finally leading Priya to confront her and be like, you are humiliating me at every turn. Bela finally realizes and sort of apologizes for it. I did find it weird how much she focused on her boobs. Even Kimberly called it out, which I'm glad she did. This was the closest we got to a self-aware moment from Bela when she mentioned that Priya helps her insecurity issues, because Priya sees her as this mentor figure and that helps her own confidence. Still, in general, Bela's self-awareness is so not there. It's to the point that it's unrealistic, and therefore I'm like not as invested in her journey. So on the professional front, we get a lot with Bela going on and her ruining a lot of that too. We see a lot of the Foxy, and they end up getting an article written about them in the student magazine. Bela gives some great quotes, so the writer ends up pivoting the article to just focusing on Bela. Bela has a chance to change this. As the leader, she's shown a preview of the article, but then she doesn't, and she keeps the article as is, focused on her, which then leads to the Foxy team feeling very frustrated and excluded. She's like constantly so selfish, but I find it just hard to believe that even such a selfish person wouldn't think of the consequences like at all of what she's doing. And I know she's supposed to be like not self-aware and having insecurity issues, but like she's to the point where she's not believable as like a multifaceted real person. And she's not. She's a TV character. But the point is to make these characters feel real. So the nail in the coffin for Bela is when she gets canceled online by a newer writer to the Foxy because the new writer had asked her for feedback on her comedy writing, and Bela sits her down and is just like, your stuff sucks and you should go into advertising. I think it's great that she faced cancellation because that's a very like relevant consequence and interesting as a consequence for her. It's something that can really hurt her and her reputation. But I just wish this whole situation had just been like a little bit more nuanced and better written. Just the way she told off the new writer, it felt like placeholder text. It felt like, okay, this is where Bela says she sucks and she should go into advertising. I would think they would make that interaction more subtle, where like it starts with Bela trying to give feedback and then she subtly tells her she sucks. They didn't elaborate that interaction at all. If Bela had tried to put it more nicely, maybe I would have believed that she was shocked that she got canceled. How could she blatantly be so rude without even realizing she's being super rude? Post-cancellation, the Foxy girls kick Bela out of the group. It is the last straw. And they also say she can't live with them next year, which was Bela's plan. And because of all this, Bela decides to transfer schools, and that is the cliffhanger we leave off on for season 3. This season, overall, Bela had a really rough ride. She went to rock bottom, and she really had no substantial growth. However, in season 3, I don't think she's transferring at all. She's one of the main characters. We're obviously not losing her, just like we didn't lose Kimberly this season. They're probably going to resolve the transferring thing really fast. She's really going to have to rehabilitate her reputation next season, but I predict next season's going to be like her big redemption arc, and she's probably going to have like a lot better choices. She can only go up from here. So finally, our last main character is Whitney, and Whitney's arc was kind of similar to Kimberly, where it was a little bit all over the place, a little bit lost. I enjoyed parts of Whitney's journey, especially the parts about like feeling lost in her major and her career. And I think it's kind of an unpopular opinion. I think most people don't care for that plot, and I do have issues with it, so I'll get into that. I just kind of like that that journey was a little bit more mundane and relatable. Does it make exciting TV? No, not really, but I appreciate the aspect of like acknowledging feeling lost as a college freshman. So on the romance front, oh my god, this was rough for all of us fans. I don't think any fan liked the Bio Bro plot. I think he was the most hated character I've seen on Twitter and Reddit. It kind of felt like they were trying to make a Ben Gross academic rival situation for Whitney and what's his name? Andrew. But he literally had no redeeming qualities and was just so obnoxious. There was nothing to like about him. Also, did y'all know this guy is a Nepo baby? I'm going to show you a deleted scene from part 1 of this video. Nepo baby alert. Julia Louis-Dreyfus, what's her name? The lady from Seinfeld. This is her son, apparently. So I had to cut that part out of my video because when I did some research on the computer, like IMDb and Wikipedia, I could not find any connection between this guy, Andrew's actor, and Julia Louis-Dreyfus. I still can't say her name. I couldn't find their connection on IMDb or Wikipedia. The only source I had for this Nepo baby connection was from like a random Reddit comment I had seen. But then later on Instagram, and there he had pictures with his mom, Julia, from Seinfeld. So he is a Nepo baby, and he's hiding it on IMDb. Like somewhere on IMDb, I saw that he was like British or something, and they're not British, so something fishy is going on. But yeah, everyone hated this Andrew Whitney romance. They started off as rivals, they hated each other. He was super microaggressive and rude, always diminishing her intelligence, but he has muscular arms, so that makes up for it, I guess. Like, I feel like they try to have these tender moments with them, but I'm just not invested. I don't like this guy. They would have really had to like change his attitude to make us interested in him for Whitney because Whitney's one of the like nicest roommates. We don't want a shitty guy for her. But yeah, he like thinks she's the Nepo baby. Look how the turntables when you look at the actors. He's mad that she benefits from nepotism, and then she turns down an internship from her mom in front of him. And then he swoops in and tries to get that internship, which they play off as like a cute thing, but I was like, that's so opportunistic and like obnoxious. Everything he did was so obnoxious. And so they start hooking up in the lab and then the library, and there she gets caught by Canaan, which is kind of juicy and funny. But then Bio Bro asks her on a date, and they go on the date, and he's awful. All he cares about is Yelp reviews. And it's so boring, and there's no chemistry. She wants to go back to friends with benefits, but she can't figure it out, so eventually she breaks up with him. It's like the whole time she started dating Bio Bro, I was just like, wow, you found out obnoxious guy is obnoxious? Shocker. So I'm glad he's over with. Sorry to this man. By the time of the breakup, Whitney seems to be having feelings rekindled for Canaan. They keep running into each other and having like sweet banter. So she still has feelings, and that's why it hurts so much more when she sees Kimberly kissing him. On the friendship front, Whitney doesn't get like a lot of like one-on-one type friendship moments, but it was see her to bond with like her black group of friends, Willow and the other girl, who's also a Nepo baby, Niecy Nash's niece, I believe, or daughter. In her biochem class, Whitney deals with a racist interaction from her TA where he mixes up the two black girls in the class. Whitney is pretty annoyed by it, and she talks to her black friends about it. And the dialogue here felt very after school special cheesy between them, but this show is moving so fast. I think they were just trying to make the interaction quick, but it is an issue that happened, so it makes sense why it was shown in the show. But like the line where she says, oh, if I had $1 every time, I would have 63 cents. But it doesn't make sense, because wouldn't you have a lot of dollars, meaning a lot of 63 cents, which means like a weird, just the line didn't make sense on its own. I just liked the acknowledgement of Whitney when she was like, I needed this and it's nice to talk to y'all. And honestly, the girls are like, yeah, you should come around more often, especially to the KJ house, which is the black fraternity house, I believe. But aside from bonding with them, because she's secretly upset with Kimberly, she decides to move to the Kappa house for the next year without telling her. So currently we're sitting at Leighton and Kimberly wanting to live together again, and Bela and Whitney having secret plans for the next year. Bela being transferring, Whitney being going to the Kappa house. I don't think these two things will work out, and that they're all gonna live together next year, obviously. As unrealistic as that is in real life. On the professionalism front, I think Whitney got a lot of development. I mean, it was more academic for her. She got a big win here. Aside from like the racist TA and her having to have the burden of like how to deal with the situation, which is an unfair burden for her to have, she does end up choosing her major and succeeding in this biochem class she chose randomly. And that was her most prominent storyline, was not knowing what to do, choosing biochem somewhat at random, finding a passion for it, working hard at it, and succeeding at it, leading to her choosing biochem as her major. I like this journey for her. Again, I just think it was poorly written. My biggest issue with the storyline is why? Why biochem? Why science? I wish they had shown a spark for her passion in the subject. We saw no real reason why she loves science specifically. In real life, yes, people stumble into their major all the time and into whatever career they end up in, just because they might be a little bit good at a certain subject. But on a TV show, it's important for them to show us, why do we care that Whitney cares about science? Does she have a family that is affected by a certain illness that needs research? Does she idolize someone that's at the top of that field, or that is, you know, giving an inspirational advice on it? Maybe we could have seen her bump into like a high school science teacher she used to have that recognized the potential in her. I feel like we could have gotten some reasoning behind why she likes science and biochem. It's because the show is so fast-paced, we don't get to have this like development. But I would have liked to see that. I don't care about biochem because they haven't shown me why I should care. I do think her main motivation that they're trying to sell to us is that she wants to prove herself and that she can get success without her mother's help, which is a good motivation, but it still doesn't answer like why biochem or why science. It's just because it's like hard. Well, she could have chosen any other hard thing. Like, why biochem? It would have been easy enough to make up a reason for the character. Overall, I didn't mind Whitney's arc as much as most fans did, but I do feel like it was a little underdeveloped and not fleshed out. The romance part was awful. Like, cut it all off. I hope for season 3 we can see Whitney with someone good and cool and good for her. I mean, Canaan was a good relationship for her. It just ended very stupidly. Also in season 3, I would predict like the issues with her dad to come back. We didn't see any of that this season. And in season 1, we saw that she has these issues with her dad because he's very flaky. I think that was just a device to like ultimately heal her relationship with her mom in season 1. But that seems like an interesting storyline element they could bring into season 3. So all in all, I think I've said my piece about season 2. I did have fun with it. I feel like I've critiqued a lot, but I have fun analyzing and picking apart media and what I think works and doesn't work. And I would love to hear your thoughts on this season in the comments below. I would imagine you agree with at least some of the things I've said, but whether you agree, disagree, or have new theories or comments to make, I would love to hear about it. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel if you enjoyed. I put out new videos once or twice a week about TV, pop culture, internet trends, and other miscellaneous things. You can follow me at Miscellaneous on Instagram or Twitter to find out about new videos, or just turn on the bell notification here on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.